Good evening, everyone. Thank you. We're going to begin. I first want to just start by thanking everyone for coming tonight. We have a good crowd and actually several faces that I haven't seen before, so I'd love to meet you after the meeting. But appreciate very much everyone coming out tonight to talk a little bit about our Parker Building School project. So we're really excited that everyone was able to come. A special thanks to Chelmsford TeleMedia. They're recording it. It is not being shown live, but they're recording it so that we can replay it for the public. And hopefully we're going to have a good, informative night to just bring everyone up to speed with what's happening with the Parker project. We had our first community session back in October. This is the second for a little bit of a status update. And then we have a third session coming up in December. So information will be going out about that particular session. And we really hope that individuals can join us that evening as well. Each of these sessions builds upon the next. So if you happen to come to the first, great. You're going to hear some new news tonight. You're going to hear some updates. You're also then going to hear some updates at the third session in December. One of the things that we do in our weekly newsletters to the community and on our website, we've been refreshing and containing information about the project. So anytime you want an update, you can go right to that website and get that information. But again, just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We're going to have each of the presenters just introduce themselves to move the night along. I'm Jay Lang, the superintendent. Again, if you'd like to say hi at the end of the meeting, I'd love to meet you and just put a name with a face. We'll introduce the other folks, as I said, in a few minutes. A quick slide just for those individuals joining us, maybe for the first time, and for the viewing audience at home. So I can't advance the slide deck. Okay. So just real brief as way of background. This project that we're talking about tonight actually started back in 2023. So one of the first steps to even contemplating a school building project is to submit a statement of interest, they call it, or an application to the Mass School Building Authority. One of the key things about submitting an application to the Mass School Building Authority and being approved for a potential project is they will partner with municipalities. So they'll partner with the town of Chelmsford and the Chelmsford Public Schools to help defray and pay some of the costs of the program. So that's why it's critically important to apply to the MSBA. We had actually applied several years in a row for a school building project, and it was in 2023 that application was submitted. So we submitted in 2023. It was December of 24 when we actually got invited to perform the feasibility study. So the feasibility study is what we're in now to help us actually determine what direction we might want to go in with the project. We have to take consideration into what grade level school we might like to build, how big of a school it's going to be, where we're going to build the school. So that's some of the information that you're going to hear tonight. One of the first stages of the feasibility study is hiring or contracting with two specific groups. So the first thing we had to do was hire an owner's project manager, and Leftfield came on board to be the owner's project manager. That's our kind of day-to-day folks in the field that help guide our work. So we're super happy to have David and Hamdi. Again, they'll introduce themselves when they come up to speak a little bit later. And that was the first step. They came on board. You then have to hire a designer. So you have to work with an architectural firm to actually do all your conceptual drawings, to do your analysis of space, take a look at the existing facilities. One of the things as part of the MSBA program we have to look at is obviously new construction. You're also required to take a look at upgrades to the existing building, or even just like a renovation in addition to the existing building. So we have to go through all these different stages. And the OPM and the designer are critical in that component. So AI3 is our designer. So you're going to hear Leftfield, the OPM, and AI3's name quite a bit. And we have a whole group from AI3 with us tonight that are going to introduce themselves. And then they have an education planner, Mike, that'll introduce himself a little bit later. And the purpose of tonight really is to give you an update as to where we are. And then we'll have a little question and answer period at the end. And hopefully this will gear us up for the December meeting. So at this point, I'm going to actually turn it over to David from Leftfield. And David will walk us through the next couple of slides. Really hope you're enjoying this evening. So David, it's on for you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lang. So as Dr. Lang indicated, so this is a timeline of the MSBA journey, doing a project with the MSBA. As Dr. Lang indicated, there were several statement of interests that were issued, but the project came up in December of 23. They went through a robust eligibility period working with the MSBA, forming the project team. We got on board in the early summer of 2025. And I should introduce myself. David Sandin. I'm here with Hamdi Chobanoglu. We're your owner's project managers for the project. So when we got on board in the early part of the summer of 25, a few months later, probably 2-3 months later, we need a little bit of a runway to get AI3 on board. Once AI3 got on board, obviously we are now in the feasibility study. After a robust feasibility study that you will hear about, eventually we will have one preferred option or a solution. That solution will go through a robust schematic design process, and we'll end up knowing the schedule, the budget, the program, all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. We'll go through a debt exclusion vote in town meeting in early 2027, and then we'll go into detailed design. And typically the schematic design, when it's at this point, it's about 30% design. So it's still continued design that is required. And then we'll go into construction and then completion of the project in sometime of the fall of 2030. So at this point, I'll pass it along to AI3.
Good evening. So I'm Julie Rivera. I'm a senior associate with AI3 Architects. If there's anything that you need to know about AI3 and you weren't here at the previous session, it's just that we focus 100% on education design. So we've done over 100 schools since the inception of the firm, and it's something we're very passionate about. This project schedule is really just another version of everything that David just outlined, specific to the Chelmsford project. So right now, we are within this phase 1, and you'll see in the dark red column there, that is indicating when the town gets an opportunity to vote on a project. So we are working towards right now what is known as the preliminary design program, and that'll be our first submission to the MSBA. So the content that we're sharing tonight is really just information that will supplement that report. This first phase is very much about information gathering, which is also why we're here. We want to hear from you guys just as much as you're here to hear from us. One example of that is at the first session, we had an interactive mapping activity. So we had these large-scale maps, and we had posed the question to the group of, what are some challenges that you're experiencing on the existing site, but more so, what are opportunities that you can envision for the site? And you guys provided us with sticky notes on the maps, and just sharing some of those opportunities. You were already thinking about solar energy on site, just as there is on the roof, maybe geothermal energy on site, having more of a sustainable mindset for any future project. Focusing on accessibility. How can we make the building more accessible? How can we improve recreation opportunities for the town? So really starting to call out things that are important to the design and things that we will continue to be looking at as we assess each of these sites. And we extended that activity to include the Graniteville site, McCarthy site, and you guys provided us with information on how you're currently using your recreation fields. We know that this Graniteville ball field site is really the heart of all of the recreation activities that happen around the town. And we also know that there's a lot of traffic nightmares around this area too. So that was something that you guys gave us a lot of information on. And then lastly, we also posed the question of what would success look like for one of these projects? So how would you categorize that the project is successful in the end? Obviously, we don't know what that project is, but based on your responses, we know that a project that results in happy students and happy parents and happy teachers would be considered a success for the town. We also saw that, again, accessibility was important, inclusion is important, creating a environment that really allows students to thrive was something that would be successful in the eyes of this community. And maybe most importantly, what would make it a success is town approval. So we already mentioned that that will be something that will come up to be able to transition from phase 1 into phase 2 and really keep a project going. that will just provide or require town support. For anyone who was here at the previous session, or even anyone who wasn't here, we would love to hear if, off the cuff, you have anything that you would consider would be a success for a project. So we're happy to take that. If anyone has any ideas right this moment, or we'll come back to it. Okay. I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Tori, and she's just going to give an update on the existing conditions assessments.
Thank you, Julie. Like she said, I'm Tori Geyer. I'm a project architect with AI3. And we just wanted to give you kind of an update, like Julie said, on the information gathering that we've been doing mostly behind the scenes, particularly at the Parker Middle School site. So as you can see, and as you may have heard, we did do geotechnical investigations at Parker around Halloween. Very loud. They dig deep holes into the ground to give us some information about the soils. We have also completed the environmental site assessment, a hazardous materials inspection, sent some people around the site to locate with little flags where the edges of the wetlands are, some aerial site mapping with drones, as well as some traffic analysis. So these are all reports that we'll be receiving very soon to give us way more information about what's happening at the Parker site. In addition to that, we also toured the Parker site and created a 3D model and started to look at the sizes of the spaces and how that compares to what the MSBA recommends for a middle school space. So as you can see, the majority of the spaces at Parker are undersized, as noted in red, whereas really only a few of the spaces are closer to being on target, and the majority of those spaces are the modular classrooms. So most of the classrooms are pretty severely undersized. And that's the case at the main level, as well as on the lower levels as well. So among these investigations we're looking into what exactly we would need to do just for a code upgrade. So we're looking at potential new construction options, addition renovation options, as well as what if we were to just bring the building up to code. But one of the things that doesn't get addressed with that would be the sizes of those classrooms in any of those spaces. We would really just be bringing this up a little bit closer to what would need to be done in those circumstances. But some things to consider are that this is likely a cost that the town would have to incur themselves, as it would likely not be able to entirely align with the educational plan and visioning for the future of the school.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Perolo. I'm an educational planner with MLP Integrated Design, so I'm working as a sub-consultant with AI3 and supporting the district in all the educational planning and programming for the project. So I was a former teacher before I started my consulting business, and so I really come at this supporting districts from this educational lens, looking at teaching and learning and space. So to frame the educational programming for this project specifically, we kind of looked at 3 different buckets and funneled all of the information that we received during the visioning sessions to inform what's called the educational program. So we looked at ideal instructional practices, we looked at different developmental impacts and different grade configurations that we're studying as part of this process, and then how those things impact the facility and the needs that to support the teaching and learning that the district is looking for. And then the educational program is essentially a document that is required by the MSBA that entails every single piece and part of the program that is a future Parker Middle School. So in whatever grade configuration we're studying, what the program pieces and parts looks like for each of those configurations, and how the space needs to support that. So to get there, we've taken some pretty deep dives into educational needs. Over the past several months in the fall, we've had 4 visioning sessions, some with a smaller group of educational leadership team folks, and then a series of 3 larger community forum sessions where there were educators and teachers and students sitting side by side with some community members and parents as well, to really think about what the future of teaching and learning wants to be and the spaces to support that teaching and learning. So what did we learn from that information? Some of the goals that came out of that work are here listed on the screen. The idea of empowering every learner through opportunities for collaboration, adaptability, flexibility to continue to keep up with changes in enrollments and changes in what teaching and learning is in the future. Creating safe, long-lasting, and future-ready learning environments. Again, that flexibility of being able to adapt and change over time. Opportunities for professional collaboration and growth for teachers as well in the new building. Supporting the whole child, meaning not just looking at academically what they need, but also socially, emotionally, given that they're still young, they're still kids, they're still developing. So all of those emotions and things that make up adolescence, what are those things that we can support students with? Honoring community, culture, core values, the pride of the community, how that can show up. And then some additional considerations. What is the cost of a project? The continuity for students, crossover of different age levels, the ability to work with students from different grade levels and teachers from different grade levels. And then obviously what's most developmentally appropriate as we look at all these different grade configurations. As part of the conversation specifically about grade level configurations, in the visioning and programming session so far, we've continued to wrap our brains around 3 different scenarios that we're studying per the MSBA process. The smallest enrollment of 930 students for just grades 5 to 6, which is your current model. Then we have grades 4 to 6, just 1,390 students, and then grades 5 to 8, which would be the largest enrollment, just shy of 2,000 students in those schools. And those are the grade configurations, the sites that we have to study. You see here that Julie mentioned before, the 3 different sites in the district and how they play with the different enrollment scenarios. So some of the outcomes that we've heard so far during those sessions. So here's your current grade configuration of grades K to 4, and then you have your middle school currently at grade 5 to 6. What we did is we started to ask in each scenario, what if? What are the pros and the cons? And so tonight we're just highlighting some of the pros for each that came up. So in a grades 4 to 6 model, it resolves some of the overcrowding that's happening district-wide. 4th graders maybe developmentally are more aligned with 5th graders, many folks felt was true. And then bringing 4th graders into more of a middle school model just may offer them more opportunities for additional programs and spaces that they may not have the ability to have currently in the elementary school. More of the science, STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, math, some of the more robust programming that's at a middle school level 4th graders can take advantage of. Go ahead, Julie. In a grades 5 to 6 model, one of the obvious biggest strengths is it maintains this separate lower middle school configuration that was recently established by the district not too long ago. And then the largest configuration of grades 5 to 8, it still is supporting that the resolution of overcrowding district-wide. It gives us an opportunity and flexibility to organize maybe a lower middle school, upper middle school within a building. And again, 5th graders and 6th graders gain access to more programs and spaces, just like those 4th graders do, those kiddos in a 4 to 6 model.
So Mike mentioned overcrowding as an aspect of studying all 3 of these enrollment options. These are slides that we actually showed at the previous session, but they're really from the master plan that was conducted in 2016 and then updated in 2021. And we like them because they're very telling. They're very easy to understand. Everything shown in red here, and each of these buckets is representing one of your district schools. Each of the buckets shown in red is overcrowded. So all of your elementary schools are overcrowded. Parker Middle School is overcrowded. And based on the NESDEC reports, there is a capacity increase right now that is felt that wasn't even in play at the time that these studies were completed. So looking at those 3 enrollment options that Mike mentioned, maintaining that 5 to 6 enrollment resolves the overcrowding issue at the current Parker, right? We would be able to do a building project that's either adding the space required to fix that overcrowding problem, or we'd be building new and thus fixing that overcrowding problem at the 5 and 6 level. Unfortunately, you're seeing those red buckets are still overflowing at the elementary school level. So certainly an option, but if we're considering just population support, it's not resolving the overcrowding issue. The 4 to 6 option, however, would allow us to create a building project that was both sufficient for the middle school level, and then bringing 4th grade out of all of the elementary schools and into that building would then free up a whole grade level at each of the elementary schools. So you can see in this diagram, all of these schools have a level of capacity that they can support their student enrollment. So they're not overcrowded, and that would resolve a substantial issue in the district. The grades 5 to 8 option would also resolve overcrowding across the district. So similarly, a building project that builds either a full 5 to 8 school would allow for the McCarthy school. So we would take the 7th and 8th grade out of McCarthy, move into the 5 through 8 school. That frees up another district school, and thus that can become a new elementary school perhaps. And as a result, all of the schools are appropriately at their functional capacity and are no longer overcrowded. The downside with this one, it's a really big school. If you make a 5 through 8, a lot of students on one campus, and in subsequent meetings, we'll be able to share cost information, so we'll project some cost for these conceptual options. 5 to 8 will be a bigger school, will result in higher costs to the district. Programming development. So continuing the visioning sessions that Mike put together, we also had the opportunity to tour recent school projects. So we were able to get a group of district leaders, teachers, staff, and we were fortunate to be able to visit 4 recently completed schools, some elementary schools, some middle schools, really just to cover that range of the enrollment options available. And what the district was able to take away from these was that they got a better understanding of spatial relationships, how student collaboration can be incorporated into an academic way, ways that we can have flexible spaces, overlapping of spaces, and really better support the delivery of the educational program with just some creative organization. And so we took that information back, and we organized a few programming workshops. So with the same leadership group and gaining feedback, we were able to move some pieces around, develop some conceptual schemes. And so the diagrams on the screen here are representing a potential academic wing organization in an idealized building. So each of these pods would include a pair of classrooms that could support the team teaching dynamic already established at the middle school level. There would also be integration of special education spaces, support spaces, student collaboration that can be accessed by all classrooms within that pod, and then as well as media support, technology support. So really looking at an idealized organization, and then also how to integrate some of those shared spaces, so art, music, technology. There's a really robust music program in Chelmsford that's really exciting, and so we look forward to opportunities to be able to combine that with the TV studio perhaps, or the art studios. Next, we looked at ways to, or actually common gathering spaces. So how to bring those pods together and support them with a common gathering space, for example. Maybe that's the media center. We're also exploring ideas of taking that media center and distributing it, breaking it up within the school. So really just some abstract conceptual diagrams we'll continue to develop, but it's starting to get at some creative ways of organizing space and supporting the team teaching and collaboration already taking place at the Parker Middle School. Now, with all of those enrollment options and all of the site options that Mike mentioned, how will the district ever come to a preferred scheme? We've developed an evaluation matrix that outlines all 13 of the options that we're required to study. And in the coming months, the building committee will be able to have enough information based on the concepts that we're putting together and all of the information that we're gathering at this phase to be able to score each of those options based on the criteria that they established. So that will provide us with a very objective method of being able to come to a preferred option. That preferred option or options will then continue into the next phase. So at the end of January, we'll move into the next phase, and we'll likely have, maybe 6 options to explore instead of 13. But we will be able to continue to report back to the community on the progress of those decisions. Looking ahead, our next community forum is December 17th. So by then, we will be able to continue the conversation of grade reconfiguration and the progress of the educational program. We talked more about what the educational program is at our previous meeting, but essentially it's sort of the thesis of what will support the district's teaching and learning and how the building spaces are required to support that educational program. And then, of course, building committee meetings occur on a monthly basis, and those are certainly open to the public as well. We go a little bit more in depth on kind of more of the details of the development of projects and information that we've gathered, and so we'll continue to report out on that. But one of the more important reasons that we're here is, of course, to hear any feedback or questions, take questions from you wonderful people who took the time on your Thursday night to come out here. So at this point, we'd be happy to, open it up to you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So when we consider all the options and we're looking at that larger school that encompasses 5 through 8, to resolve our spacing problem, we would need to then have McCarthy be some other school, elementary or whatever we chose it to be. In your studies and everything that you're going to do, are the costs of updating McCarthy to make it so that it can be a good elementary school, is that included in these studies?
It is, yeah. So in the previous slides, I'll just go back to it. So we have identified that as it will be a code upgrade only option. So we are currently studying the costs. Just as Tori mentioned, there will be the costs associated to once you reach that threshold of accessibility or fire protection upgrades. All of that will be consolidated within a spreadsheet. We will get a cost associated with that, and that will be considered for any of those enrollment options moving forward.
Can I ask a clarification? So I think what Maria was asking is if we went forward with the 5 to 8 school, the thought process would be that doesn't solve the district's overcrowding at all at the elementary school level. So if McCarthy technically came offline, if we built a brand new 5 to 8 school, but McCarthy became an available school facility to be maybe repurposed for an elementary school, would the cost of what it's going to take to convert the current McCarthy to an elementary school building be included in this project and reimbursable or not?
Got it. The answer in that scenario would be no.
Right.
Yes, so my mistake.
I had a feeling
So that's really important for everybody to realize that, because it does not solve one of our very large problems. And in order to then solve that problem, it's going to cost us a lot more money.
Really good point.
Anyone else that has any questions? There's plenty of time, so just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic around. And you just have to speak close to the mic.
Hi. I missed the first meeting, but you had mentioned how the community would use the new building. So I was just curious what came up and how the community could use the new building.
Sure. So having a new building, or even, so we don't know yet if it would be an addition renovation or a new building, but we'll say it's a new building, or either scenario would have a enlarged gymnasium, for example. It would have a larger dining space with a stage that's more acoustically appropriate than what you have now. So even those two spaces offer a lot of opportunity for community recreation, possibilities for the district to rent those spaces out. And then an enhanced performance space, not necessarily an auditorium if it were to be maybe the 4 to 6 or the 5 to 6, because that's not something that Parker has currently, but still a stage within the cafeteria space, and that could be used for performances, community events. So definitely paying attention to how can we include spaces and organize the building in a way that allows for the community to access it after hours.
All right. This is just kind of a crazy question, but I'm just thinking of remodeling, right? Let's just go big. Is there a pool anywhere in the district? Huh? Does the high school have a pool? Does it have a swim and dive team? Just wondering, just putting it out there. You know, new building, pool, high school can use right across the street.
Yeah.
You know, why not?
Not to be a killjoy here, however, two things that are likely not going to be in our school are a pool or a hockey rink. Those are two things that the MSBA will not participate in. We do have a swim team, boys and girls swim team at the high school. We use the low Y. To be honest with you, there are not really schools around that have pools, just because of the pure cost even to operate them outside of a 10-week swim season. Yeah, would it be wonderful? Yes. But the cost would be very cost prohibitive. I just don't want to have you leaving here with any high hopes. The community could use it, but no pool and no hockey rink.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely valid. And as we continue to develop the space summaries and all of the spaces that would encompass any of these new projects, there's certainly been attention to, that balance between making sure that any project isn't being blown over, like the district is requesting so many additional spaces, at a cost to the community ultimately. So there's a lot of care in paying attention to that balance between what you need and then hopefully making it very affordable.
I'm going to raise a question that one of my school committee colleagues brought up the other day in a meeting, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot talking to my children, one of whom will be at Parker while the work is being done on the new building. And that is a question I've heard from parents, and I know some of my colleagues have been hearing as well, which is whether there is an analysis as part of this project of the impact of the construction project on the existing students at the existing school while it's going on. This is going to be at least a few years of a building project, and so the impacts it will have, for example, if it's next door to Parker, on the ability of students to go to recess, the ability of students to have breathable, clean air in the building, noise, maybe not noise free, but tolerable amounts of noise for while they're learning and things like that. It was not something I personally had thought significantly about until my son, who's currently at Parker, came home and told me about how he couldn't go out to recess on the days they were doing the boring tests, and how noisy it was. And so I didn't know if that's something that is being kind of considered as part of all of this design work.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely a factor. As we get further in the process and there is a proposed design, very delicate care will be taken in the development of phasing plans for any project. And I will note that we have done numerous projects where a new building is really within 20 feet of the existing building. And that certainly has its disadvantages, but it also has its advantages. I mean, even sort of partnering with the school and the contractors so that it becomes a learning experience for the students. There will also be, back to the idea of phasing, I mean, attention to the hours that the work is occurring and any kind of noisy situations. We will say that any new project will be less disruptive as an ad reno project would be. That would take even more care into the scheduling of the activities to make sure that it is as minimally as disruptive as possible. But as a result of that, it would just ultimately take longer to construct. Knowing that maybe a lot more work is being done during the summer, maybe some of it has to go on pause given the school scheduling. So it's certainly a factor. At this point, everything is so conceptual that we aren't in the weeds about it, but it will always be part of the conversation as we get into the construction documentation phase.
So I've been thinking a lot about the grade 4 to 6 configuration. It certainly solves problems for overcrowding, and I think the ages of those kids together make sense. But it's occurred to me that the daily learning experience for a 4th grader is very different from the daily learning experience of a 6th grader, at least in our current situation. The 4th graders have a single teacher for their major subjects. They don't freely walk around the building. They get led from place to place. Whereas the 6th graders have the team approach and the electives and the ability to move between classes on their own. Are those kinds of things considered in the design phase, or are those just things that the staff deals with later?
They are definitely been part of the discussion right now, and I could certainly leave it to Dr. Lang to maybe speak more to where maybe some of those conversations are heading, but it has definitely been part of the conversation.
Yeah, so we, I don't want to buy back to people. We certainly have already kind of had those discussions, and they're ongoing. We would have plenty of time to kind of figure out exactly what we would want to do. Certainly have to be some discussion about, the whole teaming concept, because right now, as you indicated, in grade 4, we have singular teachers that work with the kids all day long. When you get to 5 and 6, we go to 2 teacher teams. One does math science, one does ELA social studies. Then when you get to 7, 8, it's by concentration. So you have a designated science teacher, a designated math teacher right down the line. So those discussions in a 4 to 6 would have to take place. It really is not a huge impact on the classrooms as far as like the design or the work we're doing right now. So we do need to document it within the educational program. But the way that we were actually considering doing our clustering of the classrooms, we would have the classrooms in the same kind of pod of the same area. So whether the children were going next door back and forth to a teacher for 2 subjects, or they were staying in 4th grade in their own classroom, it's not going to affect the number of classrooms you would have or even where they're located. So we don't have to make that decision right now. I think we'd want to get more input also from the staff and the parents and even the students to kind of be able to track their experience a little bit, but that's not going to impact the design. The same number of classrooms, it's just where the kids are being serviced and by who wouldn't impact us at this point. So we do have plenty of time, but it's being talked about.
So I saw mention of common gathering spaces in there, and that's not something you typically think about in a school, right? You think about classroom usage and stuff. So can you talk a little bit about the intent behind those? It seems to imply that there's maybe a focus on giving kids the independence and free time to use those spaces?
Do you want to answer that? One of the things that we talked about in the visioning and programming sessions, and one of the things that's happening nationwide and worldwide, is just not a sense of free time, but in the instructional time itself, having teachers sharing students or collaborating across 2 classrooms. So in the example, Dr. Lang was saying how, maybe in a 5th or 6th grade class, you might have this teacher here teaching reading and writing skills, and this teacher here teaching some type of social studies content, that they could do an activity where both are covering standards, but they're combining kids and classes, and they may not want to do it just in a classroom because it just may not be big enough. So there may be space that's shared among those grouping of classes that they can kind of spill out from classrooms and do that collaborative work together. So between that kind of shared breakout space or collaboration space in the classroom itself. And we haven't gotten into the weeds yet about how those spaces are physically connected and what the visual connection is, but it just allows more of a flexible opportunity to collaborate.
We just wanted to clarify one of the slides. If it were to be a 5 to 8 building and McCarthy were freed up, would that become a new elementary school for K through 4, or were all fourth graders going to McCarthy from all 4 elementary schools? Because we couldn't see from over here where the lines were.
Oh, sure. So the district would ultimately be able to decide what they want to do with any remaining building. However, we weren't proposing that fourth grade would be in a school completely by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that option did was basically give us the ability to have some extra flexible space. One of the things that we know we're dealing with now, and it's only going to be exacerbated in the future, is an enrollment increase, particularly at the elementary school level, working our way up through middle and the high school. Just this year alone, we added 60 students to the district. There are a lot of districts in the state whose enrollments are actually declining. Ours is increasing. We added 60 this year, but we're projected to increase another 500 to 600 students over the next 10 years. We physically don't have the space in our buildings to be able to accomplish that. So we're trying to, as we're kind of going through this project, accomplish the very most we can in one school building project, because we do know it's going to take time. We've been at this for years to even get to this point, but by the time we get through the various stages, and we were actually, if we were to build a brand new school and open it, you're talking 2030. That's still another 5 years down the line. We really don't have the time to then start at that point the process to build a second school. And I think also in the town, funding is an issue, obviously, for all of us to be considering. We need to try to get the best bang and the most bang for our buck in this one particular project, because the town really isn't set up to just continually keep building schools. So as we're going through this process, that is one of the things that we looked at. The 5-6 school, and we're going to hear about this a lot over the coming months, the 5-6 school would certainly give any student in Chelmsford in grades 5-6 a great new building and a great opportunity, and it would be right-sized for the next 10 years of grades 5 and 6. But that does not help us at all with the elementary enrollment, and it doesn't help us really beyond. The 4, 5, 6 helps us because it allows us to basically, again, remove a grade level, 100 to 120 students from each of our existing elementary schools into the new 4, 5, 6. All students in grades 4, 5, 6 then benefit from the brand new school, and again, it's right-sized to the conditions over the next 10 years. Our elementary schools would then go K to 3. They then have another really 5 or 6 classrooms to be able to help with some of the increased enrollment coming up over the next 10 plus years. That gives the town time to then kind of think about what is the project beyond that going out. Another complicating factor for us is that all of our schools are over 50 years old. The high school is our newest school in town, which opened in '74. These other schools are from the 50s and 60s. They're certainly at end of life. The town has done a tremendous job of maintaining them and keeping the systems in the schools up to date. But we're really at capacity enrollment-wise, and as a town, need to make an investment in a new school building project. It's not going to get any cheaper if we don't. This is really our opportunity to do it and to be able to partner with the state to do it. It's not going to get any cheaper, and we have the enrollment that warrants a needed space, particularly at the elementary and the middle school grade level. So I think that has been the major driver for this project. Who's next? Oh, sorry. You didn't.
Okay. So I have one question related to the 5 to 8 option, and basically is that if we go for that option, right, whether we have taken into account into consideration that McCarthy currently has the track, which was used by the 7th and 8th graders, and it helps towards the high school for athletics programs and things like that, so the after school clubs can do things there like running and all that. Whether we have thought are you planning to add track and field, a track in the Parker project or not? So if we are going to 5 to 8, it's something to consider. I don't know. And then I wanted also to add one comment about these common spaces. I think it's a great idea, and I think also for after school clubs could be spaces for any clubs that they are doing. So that's something.
I'll just add for the first comment on the track, any of the options that we're exploring will not be built on top of the existing track at McCarthy. So that will remain in place so that it will never be offline for use by any of the schools, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Is that just the question enough?
Well, in what happened and
What happened?
Oh,
someone else did like you that instead of chin was doing yourself without the quick step without Google like
Is asking.
so the track at McCarthy would not be going away under any of these scenarios. So, and there's not enough space at the Parker property to do any real significant field space over there, like track wise. There'll be green space. There'll be opportunity for like phys ed classes and recess. And again, maybe even some expanded classroom type stuff, but you wouldn't physically be able to put a track or like a field, like a turf football field at the Parker site under any circumstances. So if the project goes forward with the Parker site, if individuals had to access a track, they would either have to come over to McCarthy for the track or they would have to go to the high school. We do have the plateau that has a track there, but there would not be a track at the other properties being built.
Yeah, we would make sure that the existing fields at Parker are at least replicated. So we know that those are used for lacrosse and soccer practices currently. Any project at the Parker, we would make sure would still be able to have a multi-purpose field like it does today.
Yeah, the green space, like the grass area would be there. It just wouldn't be a formalized, like a track.
I was wondering about the Giganto School option where it was 5, 6, 7, 8. Someone mentioned in passing maybe it would be kind of one chunk of it would be 5, 6, the other chunk would be 7, 8, or maybe it would be. Could you just talk more about how that might work?
Sure. Mike, do you want to talk to it?
Yeah, that was me that mentioned that. So there's various ways that a school can be academically organized. It's often called, a school within a school. So you're using the opportunity of having one building project and one roof, one shared kitchen and all, certain things like that, cafeteria, gym and all that. But maybe 5th and 6th grade academic classrooms might be over here and 7th and 8th might be over here. Maybe they have a bit of a different feel, or maybe they're the exact same, but it's just an opportunity to kind of scale the building down so it feels a bit more manageable. Doesn't mean that it's 2 separate entrances, 2 separate administrations, all that. Some schools do that, but that's not necessarily this scenario. It's just the approach that we could take to organize a building so it just feels more appropriately scaled for that amount of kids, because it would actually be larger for middle schoolers than your high school would be.
And again, we're going to get into that. That just was one of the options that the MSBA is allowing us to explore, because it does actually satisfy the enrollment needs, but it would be a very large school. Again, as Mike had indicated, larger than even our high school. And, we'll get into the pros and cons. Middle school age is a tough age anyway. Having 1,900 in the same building would be a challenge. But that's one of the options, again, we have to at least explore with the state, because it does check the boxes to satisfy some of the criteria. One of the things that we're going to look at for practical purposes, we don't have any budget information at this point yet on the projects, but we'll be receiving that after the first of the year. But obviously the least expensive project would be a 2 grade level school. The middle range project would be the 3 grade level school, and the most expensive option would be the 4 grade level school. So there is a financial aspect to this. There's a practicality aspect to this. And I think that'll all kind of come to light and be part of the discussion when we get into December and January.
Just a technical question. In the 4, 5, 6 option, the 7th graders will be pushed into McCarthy. Oh, right. I'm sorry. And then I had a question about
investing into whatever the school options are is just ensuring that the kids have enough space for performing arts as well as special needs services. And if that is and expanding on those as well, because with the larger class sizes, we're going to have more needs.
Yeah. So a couple quick ones, and a lot of people may not know this. So historically, up until 3 years ago, both McCarthy and Parker were grades 5 to 8 schools. But this is the third year that we actually had done a grade level reconfiguration, and Parker now services all students in towns. Bless you. All students in towns grade 5, 6, and then all students in towns go on to McCarthy for grades 7 and 8. So that divide has already happened, and actually it's well under its way. So McCarthy 7th and 8th grade is really only impacted if it's the 5 to 8 school. Parker is the one that's impacted in all three, because under the 5, 6, it would obviously just be one brand new Parker. Under the 4, 5, 6, they were impacted by the extra head count of students. That doesn't overly impact the elementary schools because they're really just losing a grade level of students, and then they're actually adding space. So that benefits them. We have spent a considerable amount of time going through documentation of our current programs in the district, number of students, the MSBA projections. I'm actually happy with the number of students that they're allocating to the 3 different options. We had enrollment projections done with NESDEC, which is a group that works with us on that. We had several meetings with the MSBA to certify what our enrollment projection should be, because we want to make sure we're right-sizing the school. We don't want to build it too big. We don't want to build it too little. But we want to make sure that it's going to satisfy our needs over the next 20-plus years. So we have taken that into consideration. Within our buildings, the MSBA has certain allowable generic kind of square footages for different spaces. And there are certain spaces that we're going to have to exceed just because our current programs and what we want our future programs to be warrant that. We have a significant amount of special education programming in district, and we pride ourselves on that, keeping as many students in district as we possibly can. We want to continue to do that. So we have actually built in, appropriate number of classrooms and type of classrooms and setup for the classrooms in our program design. We have a very robust, fine and performing arts program. We have a very robust athletic program, and both in athletics with regard to the gymnasium space size, and when it comes to say choral arts and band music, orchestra, things like that, we just have a need for many more spaces because we have multiple classes of the performing arts running at the same time that aren't running in different schools. So we've actually had to incorporate that into the new space. And our education program has had to document that, and bless you, document that, and then make the case for having that be incorporated into the project and ultimately being reimbursable by the MSBA. So we have, and I think that's when we get to the December, when we get to the January meetings, when we start talking about the square footage of this building. It's a large building under really any of the 3 options. It's much larger than we already have. It's only going to get bigger, but we certainly have taken the time to make sure that our general ed core classes, are appropriately sized. We have sufficient of them. All of our specialists, are right sized. We have sufficient to handle our enrollment capacity in the years coming, and we haven't cut any corners when it comes to special education or specialized programs in the school. They were all incorporated, and we want them to be. No fool.
No. It's not it's not crazy this time. It's just as people were asking their questions. If we ended up going with the 4th to 6th grade option, it kind of stems off if you were talking about, educationally, would it be 2 teachers or 1 teacher? Would that switch to the middle school model? But the performing arts, would 4th graders be able to start earlier with their instruments, or would that still be 5th, 6th? Because once you decide on that, then that would affect the size of the rooms and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, again, that's not. We don't have to decide now. We actually have the years to decide it. But the building will be built to be able to accommodate flexibility in purpose. We have to take a look at, even academically, we allocate different numbers of minutes to different subject areas at the different grade levels. It may not always match perfectly. We may have to have some kind of hybrid programming in the schools, but it'll be an opportunity for us to take a look, if the 4, 5, 6 prevails, of how to actually program that properly. But we don't have to necessarily come to an agreement now as we're going through the process. We'll have plenty of time to be able to do that.
Thank you. I apologize that this was discussed. We've been focusing on 3 different tiers. In regards to the grant, is the grant also potentially tiered, or is it a question of a flat amount of money and that the tax differences will be allocated depending on which tier is selected?
So the which option we go with, the MSBA reimburses based on a percentage of your eligible project costs. So obviously you'll get more money back on the largest school because it's a percentage, but you're also paying more for that school. But the percentage cost is, the reimbursable is the same among the 3 levels. It's just based on like a total square footage and what they're actually going to have be allowable cost or not.
So you guys have obviously done this a lot of times, AI3. In your opinion, what do you think is the most value for the town with all the options and the different locations and renovations, etc., based on square footage, grade levels, amount of money spent? What's your opinion?
Oh, wow. Well, of course, all of the aspects that you bring up are important, and I'm not sure we're far enough along to be able to guide, what is better than the other yet at that point. But what we are finding are, certain ones have higher advantages than the other, at least in looking at what your current problems are. So, we recognize that the overcrowding issue, that's a big issue for the district. And so what is a project that's going to resolve that, And then even looking ahead, Dr. Lang has mentioned that the high school was something that was originally submitted for into the MSBA process. So that's another project that you guys will hopefully be able to pursue in the future. So it really comes down to not only is it this project to consider, but the town will have to take a look at just thinking ahead and following that master plan that's already been developed. So we will certainly do our best to be able to assess all of them against one another. That's where that evaluation matrix really becomes really handy, because it provides an objective view that directly compares aspects like cost and benefit to the town and sustainability. And so we'll be able to sort of report on that the further along we get, but hopefully it becomes a lot more obvious to the town too, and be able to answer that question for yourselves.
If I can just add to that, I think one of the functions of partnering with the MSBA on a project is they really want to go through a very prescribed process to figure out as a community what is best for us. So it's less, the architect and the OPM are going to guide us through this process, but what is really Chelmsford's, need? What is Chelmsford going to support? That really has to come from the community. And so that's why we've actually been having these different visioning sessions. We've been trying to engage over the last, number of years, all the stakeholders to kind of have those discussions, because ultimately as a community, we've got to come together and say, this is the project, this is why, this is the time, here's what it's going to cost, but here's what it's going to get us. And we need to get to that point between now and like late in the spring. Because we really do want to advance this, next year. There's a timeline that we'll share going forward, but the decision is really ours. We just have to back it with the data. But I think, as Julie indicated, the different matrices that they put together for us to evaluate the 3 different grade level configurations and the 3 different sites that we're potentially looking at, I do think it'll come more apparent as we get there. And then we'll have hard data to support that decision, because ultimately we're going to need to support that with town meeting. We're going to need to support that with the debt override vote. And we want to make sure that everyone's been heard, but we actually have the backup so that we can really make a credible argument as to why we need the building project that we go forward with.
Is there a point where the MSBA, will help us to assist us in doing a study on what the operating cost will be? Or is that something we would have to do in-house?
That is something that once we're into the next phase, we will do a much more robust life cycle cost analysis on operations and maintenance. So yes, all of that will be a part of the building project. It's just not something that we'll be looking at right now.
Thanks. This is maybe less a question for you and more just a thought for the group after the recent part of the conversation, which is that one of the things that gives me personally pause about the 5 to 8 option, being we would be one of the largest middle schools in the state, I think, if we were to go with that option, would be the fact that at the end of the day, no matter how ideal our design is, it is going to need to be passed in a vote, both through town meeting and a debt exclusion vote. And I think for me, my fear is that the benefit of the 5 through 8 model versus the 4 through 6 would maybe not overweigh the amount of cost that would be added by making it a 5 to 8 school versus a 4 through 6. A 4 through 6 is going to be more expensive than a 5-6 only school, but there is a clear advantage of a 4 through 6 over just a 5 to 6 replacement in a way that would be harder to argue, I suspect, for a 5 to 8 versus a 4 to 6. So it is something I think there's not always a right answer, because it's not only what is educationally smart, but it is what is the best programs for our students and what we believe our neighbors are going to be willing to vote for.
So I think this is a good follow-up question to that. When we're talking about the debt override vote and the town meeting vote, what is that vote for? So will it be, we've narrowed it down, this is our one school plan, yes or no on this school? Will people be presented with, do you think any of these options are viable? What is the hurdle that we'd have to get over with the debt override vote?
So that you are correct in your first description. It will be that there is one school project that will be voted for by the town. And what the town is voting for is that they're voting to appropriate funds to fund that school building project.
So at the ballot box, when we get there, it's not going to be like options. So between now and, again, the springtime, we're going to actually have to pick the option that we want to advance. So that's why our backup is so important as to like why we actually think this is the particular project to go forward with. This is the grade level. This is the location. Having all that backup there. So one project would ultimately go forward to town meeting with X dollar amount associated with it, passes town meeting. It then goes to a debt override or exclusion vote and would have to be voted on by the town. But the town isn't picking like options. We're basically saying here's the solution. The MSBA is willing to partner with us. Here's going to be the town's cost. Here's the MSBA's cost. But that would be just the one project going forward with the backup. Do you have another one? Okay.
Yeah, we're getting into it. We're getting some good questions.
This is why I started one. So this is why I asked the question that I did at the beginning about whether the costs of having to update and upgrade and upregulate the space that would be available to us to solve the overcrowding in the elementary level, should the option of doing a 5, 6, 7, and 8 building be the choice, is not part of these calculations at all. But that is brought up during your discussions, and that's something that's evaluated, I hope, because the impact on the town and on the schools is huge if that option is chosen. It means a tremendous amount of cost going forward to try to do that project, and more time that would need to be available in order to have the space available to solve the overcrowding. And so I'm hoping that those discussions do come up.
Absolutely. And I know it's very hard to talk in the abstract right now because we don't have costs yet at this point, but keep coming back to us. We will have that information.
I know we wouldn't probably have like the full answer to Maria's question, but as part of the work that you are doing, where we are having to look at McCarthy as a potential site and even like a renovation addition, you will actually have some hard costs around what just a code upgrade of McCarthy Middle School is.
We will.
Now,
We will.
yes,
Yep.
it wouldn't be reimbursable under the program, but at least it'll be quantified. But again, we just haven't factored that in because if that's not the project we go forward with, we wouldn't have the exercise to figure out the reimbursement.
It is.
So we would know what the total cost is. It just wouldn't be part of the factor here.
And oftentimes those code upgrade options just offer a good order of magnitude comparison point to a new project. So you will likely be surprised at how significant a cost to just bring either the Parker or the McCarthy up to today's codes compared to building new when you consider the MSBA's contribution. It starts to close that gap between having something that's upgraded versus having something that's completely new.
I just want a clarification on the decision-making process. I have an understanding that may or may not be correct. The district and the firms we've hired will come up with recommendations, but does MSBA have also a say? Like they may say, we don't like this choice, we don't want to fund it. Is that a part of the process, that it's not just town deciding? They have a big vote in it if they're going to fund it. Is that correct?
They certainly could. That's never been our experience. When we have the data and the backup to support the district's decision and the community's decision to come to this preferred option, there will be a period of time in May when we present that to the MSBA, and it's been our experience that they're fully on board. They want to support what the district and the community has elected is best for them.
Yeah, so my experience also in a couple of different communities is they are trying to partner with you. They are trying to work with you. They ultimately want the decision that comes forward to be successful, though. So it's not a good look on the community, and it's not a good look on the MSBA if we advance a project that ultimately isn't accepted by the town. So they make you kind of go through a very, again, prescribed program to make sure that you're kind of checking all the boxes and you actually have sufficient detail and backup to support the decision that you ultimately bring forward to them. I've seen them push back, and I've seen them ask for like more information, or is this truly kind of what the community is going to support. I've never seen them ultimately say, no, we're not going to support this, but we want you to do this one instead. But they'll definitely kind of guide you to make sure that you've crossed all your T's and dotted your I's within the community. It is something, and we're actually going to be doing this in December. We're going to have a presentation with the school committee. And then in January, the school committee will actually need to vote to support what's called the educational program. So the school committee actually has to weigh in. When we get to submission of the various elements, there are times where we have to come back to the school committee to make sure that, the school committee actually says, yes, we agree with this particular grade level configuration that's going forward. We think it's educationally sound. It's something we're going to support. The building committee also has to ultimately support and bring this project forward to the MSBA. So there are various procedural steps we have to get through. Again, I think we'll do it. We'll do it properly so that I don't see the MSBA saying, no, we're not going to participate. But they're definitely going to make sure that we've gone through a rigorous process. We've evaluated all the different options, the different grade level configurations, the spacing. It's pretty significant. But in the end, I don't see them saying, no, go for A as opposed to B.
Just as another point of clarification, if we do choose to go with a larger or expansion to adjust for the overcrowding, that would have to account for potentially a larger number of more teachers to also be. Are we prepared for that? Are we preparing for that cost as well?
So there's a couple of different factors. There's obviously the building factor, and the building is going to be built, any of the three options, to accommodate the long-term enrollment projection of the district. So that is covered. Yes, I mean, if we're going to be increasing 500 or 600 kids over the next 10 years, we're going to have to increase staff. But that staff is actually part of the operational budget as opposed to like a debt exclusion, a vote for this particular school. So yes, under any circumstance where we're increasing 500 kids, we have to have more staff to work with them. But the building is going to have the space for those staff to occupy to teach the kids. Anyone else? You've already done 2 or 3. I'm not sure.
Okay.
We'll be back too, so next month. So if you think of anything over the next month, we'll be here.
No, I to be honest with you, it's good to have these questions because sometimes, like, myself and some of the other administrative staff of the district and AI3 and Leftfield are so close to this because we've been kind of dealing with it every day. The things that we've just either talked about or we've assumed, the community who's just kind of getting up to speed on this may not have, and they have some of the same questions that we've asked previously. So I truly think it's a good exercise, and if people have questions, you can actually, when you go to the website, there is functionality to be able to just submit a question. As we get consistent questions, we'll also kind of put together some FAQs just so that the community actually has responses to those. But these are the perfect forums to be able to come out and kind of ask your questions, get people thinking about it. If you're talking to your colleagues, your friends, or your kids about the potential for these projects, definitely bring the questions forward. Again, we're going to be meeting in December, and that's just to get to the very first phase of the first submission to MSBA. This work is going to continue all spring, and then ultimately for the next year and a half as things get defined. So the more questions, I think, the better, because this is going to help educate the community in the end who we're going to be seeking support from for this project. So I think it's a great use of time. I encourage it. On that, I think we'll actually end tonight's meeting. I do want to take one final opportunity just to thank AI3, Leftfield, Chelmsford TeleMedia for supporting this. The building committee members, we had a meeting prior to this meeting that came out. We've been here since 5:30. But just thank you for everyone's participation in the project and the thoughtful questions tonight. I hope you feel the answers you received were on point. Keep the questions coming. And I truly do hope you're able to join us on Wednesday, December 17th, which is going to be our next third community forum. It's going to be right back here at the Elks. And we look forward to kind of bringing you to that next phase of the project. So on behalf of everyone involved, thank you very much. Hope you have a safe and happy night.